Welcome to Bridging the EdTech Gap. The purpose of this presentation is to make your innovative solutions accessible to everybody on your team. And so that means you're going to have multiple different strategies to make sure that everyone is not only comfortable, but finds the innovation accessible to themselves before they can apply it to the situations that your organization is looking for. So we've got 5 stages of technology adoption. First, we have the innovators. They're considered the risk takers. They lead the way as far as what technology is being used. And so they're often the ones that are developing these technologies and in these strategies, especially within the educational system. Then we have early adopters. These are people who see what innovators are doing and recognize the value before anyone else. And they join the movement very quickly. They join early. And they are integral in spreading the word about this new application of technology to everybody else within their field. The early majority are the ones who follow the early adopters. They're the ones who get on board once it becomes more mainstream, and they are open to the possibilities of the technology. The late majority, they're waiting to see if this new technology is actually going to improve their lives. These are often the people who are waiting for the research, the people who are waiting for proof before they just jump on board and change everything about what they're doing. And their perspective is not necessarily against the technology adoption. It's all about making sure that it is worthwhile in the end. And then our last stage is the laggards. These are the people who, no matter what you show them, they're going to be skeptical of what's happening. They're going to be uncertain about whether or not this technology adoption is actually going to make life better. And in some cases, they'll even resist adopting it at all. So they may choose not to unless they are forced. And even beyond that, this could become a sticking point for them. So when interacting with innovators, you first want to give them space to take risks. Innovators really come out when they feel that they have the freedom to be creative, to try new things, and know that if things don't go the way they initially planned, that it's okay as long as they have the reflection piece. And so a great way to make sure that innovators are still meeting their end targets, are still on track, is to create an accessible feedback loop. And this is essentially a way for them to communicate with their school leaders and making it able for them to say, hey, this is what I want to try, this is why I want to try it. And then once they test it, they can come back and say, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, and really be creating this feedback loop as they improve upon best practices. Early adopters, these are the people you're going to want to pair with innovators. These are often the people who may not come up with the idea themselves, but have incredible initiative and follow through. And this will create a natural flow of ideas. And so you also want to provide these early adopters with lots of opportunities to share, whether that be in staff meetings, in workshops, to families. You want to make them front-facing because they're really going to be the ones to get people on board and excited. And then for the early majority, when working inside of an organization, these are the ones you're going to want to provide incentives for adoption because it gets them open to the idea early on. It helps bring this idea into the mainstream and get a solid foothold. You're also going to want to create a clear communication channel for them. But this one will look different than for innovators. It's not necessarily that you're trying to create a feedback loop. It's that you're trying to create a clear line of communication so that they are aware, how is this exactly supposed to work? What are the end goals? How can they get on board and make sure that they're meeting their targets? And then you're also going to want to provide professional development for this group. These are the ones who want to be on board but may not necessarily know how to do it themselves. And you're going to want to train them so that they can remain part of your majority, so that as they are adopting, that this process goes smoothly and that they feel comfortable and confident in what they're being asked to do. When Jesus was on earth, he used many people like this. And so for innovators, you've got these disciples. They're the ones who saw Jesus and were like, yep, this is it. This is a great idea. They were sent out. They had constant conversations. And Jesus spent a lot of time talking to them and trying to get these new ideas about what faith is supposed to look like and wanted them to really be able to hold them and to carry them. And so with early adopters, you have the people who are willing to listen as they went from town to town. And Jesus sent his disciples before him. These early adopters were the people that invited the disciples into their home, who invited Jesus into their homes and wanted to hear the message. And these people were given lots of opportunities to share and to speak in marketplaces. These were usually people who had a prominent place in society, so they could see all of the amazing things that Jesus was doing, and also giving them a space to be seen with Jesus in the synagogues. And the early majority, Jesus used these people by preaching to them in large groups. He brought them together so that they could create this network to support each other as they are learning about this faith and growing and really starting to build the church without ever actually knowing that was what was happening. And so you've got these moments like the Sermon on the Mount where he stands up and he's like, hey, I'm going to bring this to all of you. I'm going to make sure that you have access to what you need so that you can not only understand this, but take it with you when you go home. He also provided the bread and the fish, and he provided for their basic needs as they were trying to learn, and he really scaffolded them into this process. So then we also have the late majority. And so within your organization, the late majority, you're going to want to connect this new technology adoption to the ultimate mission and vision, because these people are waiting to see, is this worth it? And so these are your people who are most likely on board with what your system is doing, but they don't know that this new way is actually going to make it happen. So really making these clear connections between your new technology and what that's going to do for your end goals is a great way to start getting them on board. You're also going to want to provide incentives for this group as well, because again, they're trying to see if it's worthwhile for them. Incentives will make it worthwhile. And so this group is also the ones who are going to be a little bit skeptical. You're going to want to create a space for them to be able to ask questions and ask hard questions. You're also going to want to create a space where they can critique the new technology adoption as they're doing this. Let them be able to bring their concerns and complaints forward and feel heard, and also see the direct connection for how you as a system are directly addressing their concerns, because these people are going to be the ones who are really carrying the weight. You've got your innovators, you've got your early adopters, but they account for such a small percentage of the system as a whole that you're really going to want to make sure that your technology adoption policy is geared towards this majority and not necessarily towards your innovators and your early adopters. They're already on board. They're probably moving forward with new technology before you get your late majority completely grounded. And so you're going to want to really make sure that they feel comfortable. And a lot of that is making sure that they feel heard and valued within this process, that their skepticism, that their concern, you view that as a strength and not necessarily as a hindrance. So you're also, and then for your laggards, these are the people who may not ever come around. And ultimately, as an organization, you're going to have to decide, are these people that are on board with your mission or not? And if they are, you're going to want to meet regularly to discuss this adoption. You want to be open to all of their feedback as you do this, because really a lot of their skepticism is coming from feeling uncomfortable. And it's also coming from having different professional ideas. And so instead of necessarily pushing your laggards to get professional development within this new technology adoption, this may be an opportunity to offer professional development in new educational philosophies and pedagogies. Because we see that constructivists tend to be more willing to adopt new ideas more quickly. And so if this is something you want to see people in your organization doing, maybe we need to address the root cause. And you're going to want to make them feel more comfortable in these new ideas, not necessarily in this one new initiative. And so this may take more time, but moving forward, this will be more beneficial for your laggards. And so you also want to create opportunities for your laggards to make solutions. And this is a really great way for your laggards to become innovators, because you're showing that you care about their thoughts and their ideas. And by giving them the chance to make a solution, you could come up with something that is even better than what is currently happening now. And so that's a really great way for you to grow as an organization and make sure that each individual is being valued. And so we see this happening with Jesus because we have the late majority. And the late majority, he really spent a lot of time being like, this is what Scripture says, this is how the Son of Man is fulfilling those needs. And we have lots of examples when Jesus was speaking to large crowds of him saying like, hey, I hear you, but like, this is what you're waiting for. This is how I am fulfilling that. And so he really drew those connections for the late majority. And then the laggards are kind of like the Pharisees. Jesus still spoke with them. He heard their complaints. He didn't ignore them. He didn't run away from them. He didn't shut them up in the synagogues and pretend that they didn't exist. Jesus addressed every single one of the concerns of the Pharisees. And what I love is in the book of John, we have this example of Nicodemus and how Jesus didn't turn Nicodemus away even though he was a Pharisee. Nicodemus he came and he's like, I've got all of these questions. How does any of this make sense? And Jesus talked to him and he saw that he was valuable. And as you work in an organization, it's important that you value your laggards just as much as you value everyone else in your organization. You hired these people. They had qualities that you were looking for. And so it's important that you really lean into that, even though they may not be easily on board with this new initiative. And so it's important that we keep this biblical perspective as we are initiating new technology adoptions, as we're bringing in these innovations, because it's the only way that you're going to be truly successful. Because when you approach it from a biblical perspective, you're going to value each individual in your organization. Your technology adoption will not be about your bottom line. It will be about the people who work for you and how this technology is going to enhance their lives. And it's going to be about the people you serve and how this technology adoption will improve their lives. And overall, that's what you want within a system, is to be improving the lives of the people who work for you and the people that you serve, your customer base. And in schools, that's your students. And approaching anything in education for how this will benefit students is considered best practice. And we see that from Jesus constantly. He saw individuals. He valued the individual. He protected the individual. So many parables had to do with Jesus having conversations with one person. And he took the time, despite being the Son of God, he took the time for that one person. When we also approach this from a biblical perspective, it's going to give us a balanced perspective, because we're not going to be so focused on the end goal. Jesus wasn't just focused on saving souls, the bottom line, that people believe in God. He was focused on their journey, and he was focused on what they needed in that moment to be the most open to the gospel. And he, like, for example, when we have the centurion coming and saying, my child is ill, Jesus didn't just say, okay, repent. Okay, now I'll come help you. Jesus went and he healed the sick child, so that the centurion could be open to the message of God. And he wanted to bring the service first so that his actions led, but also so that the centurion could be open to what the message of God was about. And ultimately, when we approach technology and innovation from a biblical perspective, it's going to be forward thinking. Jesus was a forward thinker. He came and he shook up the entire faith of his entire chosen people. Jesus coming and dying on the cross changed everything. And it takes a lot to get people on board with these kinds of big changes. But it's worth it and it's valuable. And we have that example from Jesus that this is what we need to move forward as a civilization, as his people. We need to consistently be following him into the future. Because if he didn't want us to move forward, he never would have come and changed everything.